Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be covering the mid lane for my Clash tier list series, so let's get into it. To move, there's going to be a lot of questions about a lot of these champions. Most champions in the mid lane I have put in the B tier. There's just a lot of champions in general, and if your main is in the B tier, I don't think they're bad in particular. I don't think many mid laners are actually bad at the moment. I just think they're probably not as good as the champs, or they don't have the unique benefits as much as the champs which are above them, kind of thing. So the D tier I'm going to talk about first. LeBlanc, Ryze, and Azir all kind of hit by pro play. LeBlanc is being buffed towards pro play at the moment. Still not in a great position. I still recommend most or almost every other assassin over her. I don't think she's bad. I think you can still play her, and if you're good at piloting the champion, you can still get wins out of her. I just don't think she's as good as the other assassins at the moment. Ryze got tagged by nerfs, so did Azir. So both these champs are down towards the D tier. I also think these champs, if you put enough time into them, are pretty good champions. They can be B/A tier champs. And Varus is here because it's the AP Varus variant, which is often picked in bad situations, and unless it's a really good AP Varus game, I would not recommend playing it. I think it's kind of reliant on his art to such a degree where if you don't hit it or you make a couple of mistakes, you can basically just be throwing the game and being a man down kind of thing. So this is why Varus is down here. For C tier, Corki, not a bad champion, has the AP and AD variants. AD variant is currently better than the AP variant. He's overall fairly okay. He's just not as strong as a lot of the B tier champions. Kayle, not as strong as a lot of the B tier champions as well. Kind of had a time where she was good in the mid lane, got her magic resist nerfed, and now she's kind of mediocre. She can still win games. You do have to kind of play around with Kayle, get it ahead, and then it will obviously do well. Brand, really good lane holder. Also does a lot of damage, really good team fighting, scales quite nicely. Doesn't have a bad early either. Overall, his wave control is really good. Just gives him a lot of power within draft, so Brand, not a bad pick. Xerath and Kog'Maw, both decent artillery mages. I just don't think they're as good as a lot of B tier champs as well. Ziggs, I would consider a better artillery mage than these two. I think Ziggs' damage is more consistent. I think these two do a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, and they're both really good champions, and in the right circumstance, they can be S tier champs. They're just not as good as Ziggs, in my opinion, and I think you can pick Ziggs in more situations and flex Ziggs support. Flex Ziggs ADC. I think Kog'Maw, of course, you can also flex ADC and Xerath support. I just think the value of Ziggs is quite high. I think Kog'Maw ADC is in a bad spot at the moment. I don't think it's bad. It's just not as good as a lot of the other marksmen in the current game. Twisted Fate got some buffs fairly recently. I think AD and AP Twisted Fate both work as good variants of Twisted Fate. He does a lot of damage when you go AD, the overall DPS with like lethal or PTA, whichever way you choose to itemize your runes, and then things like Kraken, Green Suits. Overall, his damage is pretty high. That and AP, where you just go for like a more Roa or Everfrost kind of build, utility, stuff like this. You can go raw AP, it does work, it's not bad. I just overall don't think this champ is... it has a couple of problems where it's harder to pilot. I think it has some conditions which need to be met, and a lot of champions within the current game kind of counter it. Vel'Koz, another artillery mage. I think Vel'Koz is better in the support role at the moment. He does work in the mid lane. I'm pretty sure Night Harvester is his best mythic. I could be wrong about that, but for the moment, I think Night Harvester is very strong on him. You can, of course, run like a Lost Chapter mythic. It still works. Fizz getting buffed in 13.5. He's currently okay. I think he's better than LeBlanc as an assassin. I think his R is quite a good tool. Gives him a lot of range. His E, obviously, being able to dodge spells and stuff like that, gives him power. I think there's also better assassins than Fizz. Akali, kind of pro skewed at the moment, or at least elite skewed. Of course, if you're good at Akali, then like a lot of these assassins, I would recommend playing them if you are good at piloting your champion. Talon is a bit different. I think Talon's a lot more solo queue favored. Of course, Talon can work in Clash. However, I wouldn't recommend playing him, because I think you can get more value out of other champions, a lot more control, which you'll see going up the list. I have a lot more control champions. Jace, not bad in the mid lane, better in the mid lane than the top lane, definitely. His overall poke's quite high, he has good lane pressure, just a good all-round champion. Rumble, fairly decent roaming AP kind of like burst mage, or battle burst mage, I guess. Not bad. Same with Vex, a fairly good roaming kind of assassin mage. Kind of falls into those two categories, I guess. Has a lot of range, does a lot of damage, has high ratios. Definitely worth playing if you're good at playing Vex. Lissandra is a good answer to a lot of champions. Same with Galio. Also has decent map pressure. Ziggs, good artillery mage. Malzahar, good lockdown. Really powerful wave clear tools. Overall, makes him pretty strong at the moment. Nico just does a lot of raw damage. Has a lot of power within the binding. Has a lot of power within R, stuff like this. Seraphine does really good jobs at like holding waves and just being able to stall games. She has quite a good overall like team presence. Her R's are a really valuable tool. Her damage is pretty low for like most champs here, but if you're going to have a Ceres, you're building her more to be like a util bot, which I think is fine. I think being a util bot on Seraphine is kind of the idea of the champion. Renekton is a really, really strong mid laner. If you go the full glass cannon build, you can one-shot so many champions. He's basically an assassin in the mid lane. And I think I'd have more confidence in someone with a point-to-click CC than someone who doesn't really have that, but has a bit more mobility. But Renekton's really strong in that regard. Also really good early game. Can pressure if most champions off the waves. Destroys things like Yasuo and Yone. For that matter. Silas, really good if the enemy has a lot of good ults to steal. Overall, decent champion. I would say better in the jungle, but he still does work quite nicely in the mid lane. It's mainly just getting good ults, itemizing correctly for the game, stuff like this. Talia is pretty good as an answer to a lot of champions. If they have a lot of dashes, Talia comes out quite nicely. Does do mediocre fairly early on, but scales up quite nicely, does a lot of damage. You just have to be careful making sure you're CSing correctly early on into the game. Tryndamere does a lot of damage, can overall just provide so much pressure in the mid lane with his wave clear. His tower dive potential opens up an AP slot in the jungle if you're wanting to run something like an Eve or a Silas there. Malphite, good answer to a lot of AD champions. Really, really powerful in the top lane and works quite nicely in the mid lane. Make sure you're going the tank variant. I would not recommend AP Malphite. However, you can slot in AP items. Karma is a fairly okay support in the mid lane at the moment. There are kind of, I don't even say there's like better champs, but she fills a good, unique role. She just doesn't really excel at anything at the moment. Like, she has good shielding, she does good damage, she has good wave clear, but she's not someone who excels at any of these things. But overall, decent champion. You can go Night Harvester or Moonstone like in the top lane. Gragas, really good flex potential at the moment. Really high value. Can go AP, can go semi-bruiser AP as well. Both do work on him if you're going like Aurora Ceres, or if you're just going full glass cannon, things like Night Harvester into Shadow Flame, I guess if you're going more damage. Does work. Just not as consistent damage as a couple of these other champions. Kalphas does a lot of map pressure with his ultimate, scales really well, does a lot of damage, actually a really misleadingly strong laner. I definitely recommend playing Kalphas if you do play him. Because I think his overall lane pressure in good matchups is something which you shouldn't sleep on. He can just force people out of lanes, his ult control, and yeah, his scaling. Syndra, really powerful burst mage, well, control burst mage, which I guess she falls into that bracket. Overall, her damage is really high at the moment. Her E is a really valuable tool. Her R has a really high execute threshold once you get past your first few splinters. Just gives the champ a lot of power. Zed, really strong assassin if you can play him well. I would not recommend, it's like Katarina. I would not recommend playing Katarina unless you put a lot of time into these champions. Katarina is in the A tier because I think she is really good at the moment. People just tend to itemize her poorly. Of course, people like Bork and Divine Cinder, which is still really weird to me when Protobelt and Nash's perform so much better at the moment. But then it comes down to what feels best for you. If you can perform well with these items, then maybe it'll work, but I would recommend just going the raw AP. Diana is another good assassin at the moment. She has a really good ult for team fights and good setup. Decent all-round champion. Good poke with Q as well. Ari got buff this patch. Pretty decent at the moment. Has a lot of setup. Not the highest amount of damage. Her R provides a lot of safety though. So if you want someone with good pick, good, mediocre damage, and good, well, just overall good escape, Ari works quite nicely. Yasuo, once again, really pilot driven, kind of like an Aurelia example. I don't think Yasuo is in the best spot he's been in. I think because of Shieldbow being a fairly mediocre item, it makes him kind of mediocre as well, for the average player at least. Of course, if you're good at him, play a lot of him, definitely play him. It opens up AP slot as well, and then you can have good combos with Yasuo if you have things like the Gragas or the Diana coming out. Echo, pretty good champion at the moment. Good wave clear. Overall good damage. His ult, of course, is a really annoying tool for the enemy. Provides him a lot of safety net as well. Decent champion. Pretty good assassin. Vladimir, skills like a monster. Of course, it's always you've got to be able to CS well on this champion. If you CS poorly, you will struggle to get to the strong points where you need to be. Overall, still a strong champion. Night Harvester, Rabadons, both really good items on him. Yone, probably better than Yasuo at the moment. Scales a lot harder than Yasuo. Does do a fairly similar amount of damage, at least kind of mid to like later on. Yasuo, of course, doing it a bit more early. His ult is more early game skewed than Yone's as well. Orianna is a pretty good champion at the moment. Received a lot of buffs recently. Her mana restrictions aren't as heavy. Her damage is pretty good at the moment. If you can play Orianna, she's a really good control enabler. Just overall really powerful mage. Kassadin, hit by a lot of nerfs recently. I think Kassadin isn't as good as he was, because Kassadin was like the premier mid laner for a while with the Roa Seraphs. Of course, after the E nerfs and then more E nerfs and the just overall other nerfs towards the champion like his R, it's definitely taken a toll on him. But he's gonna sit around meter. Of course, if you get late, it's still Kassadin. Kassadin will still win the game, but yeah, not as strong as he used to be. Victor, really, really powerful champion. You just have to get your stacks. If you can get your stacks early through assists and stuff like this, he becomes a monster of a champion. You basically can't lane against him if he gets an E-evolve pre like 5 minutes. If he gets like 2 or 3 assists. Zoe, really powerful as a pick champion. Once again, it's a case of if you can play it, definitely try to play it and bring it out in drafts. I wouldn't recommend playing Zoe if you don't play Zoe though. She's quite hard to play. Has a lot of learning curves within the kit. The overall buffs they kept giving to her with the E now providing pen just makes her really powerful. Katarina, already talked about, really strong assassin at the moment. Has a lot of like map control if you're roaming correctly, finding the good openings. Of course, you're not really playing this champ unless you main her, because well, most Katarina mains will probably play her no matter what the situation is. So as much as it's like I'd say this champ's strong, it has a really high learning like skill curve, and it takes a lot to learn, so only really play if you play it. Twitch, really good at the moment. Actually, kind of a sleep OP mid laner at the moment. I kind of consider putting him in the S tier. I think AP Twitch is a incredibly powerful mid laner. Good wave clear, good roams, good damage, good control with his W. Just a really powerful champion. You know what, I'm putting him in the S tier. I think Twitch is just that good. He's a really, really valuable champ to have in your draft. Zac, really strong tank at the moment. One of the other tank options you can have in the mid lane. Just overall powerful with the kind of like itemization, like your Radiant, your Demonics, good sustain, kind of early game skewed. Does still scale, but of course, talked about it. Kind of like a free item spiker. Tristana, really, really powerful mid laner into a lot of champions. Does a lot of raw damage. Good when you go like Kraken, Navori. These 2 items make her really powerful. Her bomb does an insane amount of damage. Really good siege. Just a lot of power within the champion. Gangplank, really good control. Incredible setup. Like the amount of zone control he has just makes him so valuable to any team comp. But you do have to kind of play him. If you don't really play him, you will look like a fool when you mess up your barrel combo. So I wouldn't recommend it if you don't have that much time in Gangplank. But if you do, he's still a monster of a champion. Hasn't been nerfed yet. So definitely consider it. Akshan, really, really hidden like OP mid laner at the moment. Of course, it's fairly niche. Not a lot of people play it. But if you do, it's really, really strong with its the amount of pressure it gives. It's kind of like a Tristana, except from it's more it's got more I don't know if I'd say more mobility. It just has more pressure. It has more pressure at least early on through the double autos and the shielding and the movement speed within his kit. Of course, Tristana does a lot of raw damage of just like hopping on someone and then full bomb kind of thing. Whereas Akshan's a lot more harass and just kind of poke, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's the niche he kind of feels. Pantheon, really, really strong answer to a lot of champions. Beats most assassins. His overall raw damage is really high as well. W's incredible lockdown. His wave clear is good. You can you can change your itemization and runes and not like suffer too badly from it. Things like Scorch, Mana Flow work quite nicely as a pairing. Like Sudden Impact, Eyeball also work really well as a good pairing. just a really solid champion at the moment. Does fall off. You do have to acknowledge this. So make sure you'll get like closing games early. Aurelia is really, really strong at the moment if you can play her. Kind of like a Yasuo. I've already talked about Aurelia a lot recently, where this champ is as good as the pilot. Does struggle into some matchups, but will win most as long as you can play the champion. Heimerdinger is a really, really powerful mid laner at the moment. He got buffs towards his AP ratios to kind of like mitigate the damage of the support nerfs. And overall, it's put him in a really good spot. He's a really nice champion to play if you want good control setup, objective taking, just really high DPS as well. Pretty good roams. Just makes him quite powerful. Lux, really simple to play. Good setup, good damage, good wave clear. Doesn't scale too hard, but still doesn't scale poorly. Fairly good mid game. That's kind of where she's strong. Definitely a fairly good pickup. Singed, of course, is more of a roaming champion when you put him in the mid lane. He still works as a functional mid laner. It's just Singe's free 2 item power spikes are really strong. When you have the demonic Rylai's and Swifties, you become a monster of a champion. It's really hard to shut Singe down because he can just run through team fights and output a lot of DPS. Cho'Gath, this is the Roa variation. I'm pretty sure you can also run tank Cho'Gath in the mid lane. He just has a lot of power, lots of sustain. He's a really good scaling tank if you need one. He just fills a good role of a flex potent, like you can flex him as well. Just a lot of power in this champion. Got a lot of buffs recently. Put him in a really good spot. Kled, of course, kind of rising up in the LEC at the moment as a really good flex pick between mid and top. Of course, this is either the Stridebreaker or the Eclipse variant of Kled. You're not really going Gold Drink on him anymore. Gold Drink is a fairly mediocre item, combined with the fact that Stridebreaker's overall value is really high with Kled because it allows you just to stick on people and your damage will kind of carry you through that. So, Kled works really well. Veigar, really, really strong after the buffs. The range it gave him opened up like new ways of answering certain champions. Just for E, W, and Q having as much kind of range as they do can allow him to play safe whilst also stacking at a good rate. And just the overall damage he does is still really high. They haven't really nerfed it. So more range on a champion which does insane damage. He becomes a lot better. So definitely worth. Kennen, really, really good in the mid lane at the moment. Even though he's being buffed this patch, Kennen is an insanely good mid laner. He has really good roams, really good team fight. He's able to kind of like fit in the AP kind of assassin role which you want within the mid lane without taking it up in the top lane. So you can run a front line in the top lane. Overall, really, really strong with the fact that he can kind of like open up a new, not new, but like open up an option within the top lane, which you wouldn't usually be able to have if you're running Kennen in the top lane. Because of the way the AP assassin kind of like works. Zillion, really, really powerful enabler, really strong wave clear, really good scaling. His R is an incredibly valuable tool. Just a really, really good champion. Does a lot, so definitely worth it. Swain, really, really good teamfight champion. Kind of bad pre-6. You're very reliant. You're 6, 9, and then Leandri's power spikes. Then Rylai's after that. These kind of like spikes are what kind of build you up, and then you want to get like Zhonya's. Swain is very reliant on his spikes, so make sure you're playing at your spikes rather than kind of playing at like level 5 when you're not particularly strong and you're weaker than most champions. Twitch, yep, already talked about. Cassie, really, really strong as an anti-dash champion, as an anti-engage, really good chase, really good just overall power within this champion, beats most here. Yeah, really recommend Cassiopeia. Anivia, got enough this patch, but still really strong. Roa and Ceres make her really, really powerful in terms of you can't kill her. She does an incredibly large amount of damage, and that overall power just makes her really strong. Good zone control as well. The zone control is insane on Anivia. Kind of early game skewed. People don't really notice this, but Anivia is actually kind of 2 to 3 item early game skewed. But still a really good champion. So definitely worth picking up. Annie, even after 2 rounds of nerfs, still really good at the moment. Her overall DPS, her the value that having a stun at level 1 provides, just really high. Gives her good invades. Her scaling is insane. Rylai's is really powerful with Tibbers. The East Shield, of course, it's not doing as much damage as it once did. It's still doing a lot of damage. Blocking things like Leandri, stuff like this as well. And Asol. Probably the best scaling mage at the moment. He just does so much damage once you hit 2-3 items that you basically can't lose on this champion. He is probably a harder scaler than Kassadin, in my opinion. I think the amount of overall DPS, control, and the way his abilities scale up is so powerful that once you hit your 3 items, it's the area which you can just possess, and if you're running good team comps around him, it just becomes really, really oppressive to play against. So that's kind of like mainly what I'm getting at. Overall, yeah, these 5 mid laners definitely kind of a step above the rest. There's a lot of, I honestly, mid lane being the way it is at the moment, that most champs, almost every single champ is viable here. Like, on this list, most champs are viable. Of course, the S tier champs are going to be the best way to go about if you want to win. A tier champs have a lot of power within certain ways. B tier champs, most of them are still really good. You can 1v9 games on these champions. C tier champs, it becomes harder. A lot of assassins here, where you can still 1v9 games on assassins. It's just Shieldbow and Overhill and Bloodfaster can make it kind of hard to assassinate ADCs, which is the main kind of role. But once again, still can carry games, and even D tier champs can carry games. I haven't put any in F tier because I don't think there's any F tier mid laners. I think overall the general realistic thought is most mid laners are good, and if you're confident of a champion, if you're a confident LeBlanc player, and you can play it better than something like a Victor, then you'd play LeBlanc over Victor because you have confidence in the champion, and you will probably win more games on the LeBlanc. So, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.